The third grade classroom at Lincoln Elementary buzzed with the low hum of recitation practice as 8-year-old Aaliyah Brooks sat on the front row, pencil poised above her workbook. Sunlight slanted through dusty windows onto rows of desks cluttered with pencil shavings and crumpled worksheets. Aaliyah's chest fluttered with excitement. Today she planned to read her favorite poem aloud for the first time. Across her desk, the other students doodled or whispered, but she felt ready, proud of the dozens of nights spent practicing lines under her grandmother's gentle guidance. When Mrs. Hargrove called on her, the class fell silent. Aaliyah took a deep breath and began, "I wandered lonely as a cloud." Her voice trembled at first, then found its rhythm as she savored each word. But halfway through, her tongue fumbled on daffodils, twisting the pronunciation into something awkward. A ripple of giggles spread across the room. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes narrowed behind thick glasses. Well, isn't that creative?" The teacher sneered, her voice loud enough for every student to hear. She paused, tilting her head. "Are you sure you know what daffodil means, Aaliyah? Maybe you should stick to coloring." Aaliyah's cheeks burned. Classmates exchanged smirks. A boy in the back covered his mouth as laughter tumbled from his lips. The classroom's warmth turned to ice, and Aaliyah slid in her seat, wishing the wooden floor would open and swallow her whole. After class, as other children scurried to recess, Aaliyah lingered at her desk, tears prickling at her lashes. The chalkboard's smeared math problems and holiday decorations blurred before her eyes. She tried to steady her breathing, pressed her face into her arms, and let the bitter sting of shame wash over her. The classroom's confident chit-chat and squeaking sneakers mocked her stillness. In that moment, the bright spark of her love for words felt like a cruel joke. Walking home that afternoon, Aaliyah's brave front crumbled. She replayed Mrs. Hargrove's mocking tone and the classmates' laughter like a broken record. Arms wrapped around herself against the cold, she vowed beneath the leaden autumn sky, "They may make me small today, but one day I will stand taller than their ridicule." By the time she reached the peeling blue door of her grandmother's house, her tears had dried, replaced by a seed of resolve that would grow far beyond the scuffed linoleum of that third grade classroom. In the quiet of her grandmother's kitchen, steam rising from a pot of tomato soup, Aaliyah slipped into her grandmother's lap. "They laughed at me," she whispered, voice cracking. Her grandmother stroked her hair and, with a quiet fierceness in her eyes, said, "Let them laugh, child. Your mind is your own world. They cannot touch it unless you let them." And in that moment, amid the lullaby of clinking spoons and grandmother's steady heartbeat, Aaliyah felt the first stirrings of a promise she would keep forever. She would never again let anyone define her worth. That evening, Aaliyah trudged home beneath a sky smeared with lavender dusk, her heart heavy with Mrs. Hargrove's cutting words. The cracked pavement of her neighborhood seemed to echo each mocking laugh. Inside her grandmother's modest bungalow, walls lined with faded family photographs and shelves of well-worn books, Aaliyah collapsed into a kitchen chair, clutching her tattered notebook against her chest. Her grandmother, Mama June, a petite woman whose hands bore the gentle stains of decades spent cleaning classrooms, placed a steaming mug of herbal tea before her. Without a word, she slid a battered set of encyclopedias toward Aaliyah, volumes rescued from a school closing. Each spine was frayed, the pages yellowed, but to Aaliyah they gleamed like treasure. "You have questions?" Mama June asked softly. "These books have answers." That night, under the glow of a single desk lamp, Aaliyah cracked open the first volume. The scent of old paper filled her lungs as she dove into articles on photosynthesis, Greek mythology, and civil rights leaders. Her pencil hovered over margins, where she sketched little stars beside facts that made her heart leap. Marie Curie discovered radium. Harriet Tubman led hundreds to freedom. The Amazon covers 7 million square kilometers. With each new fact, the embers of her self-worth glowed brighter. As bedtime neared, Mama June quizzed her on what she'd read. "What's radium used for?" she asked. Aaliyah answered with trembling confidence, "Early cancer treatments." When she stumbled, her grandmother never scolded, only guided her gently back to the page until the answer shone clear. Night after night, they repeated the ritual. Encyclopedia pages flickering by, pen and paper quizzes, whispered encouragements. Aaliyah's notebooks rapidly filled with definitions, doodled portraits of historical figures, and lists of words I will master, each new entry a victory against the doubt Mrs. Hargrove had sown. By the end of the week, Aaliyah carried herself with a quiet pride at school. Though the taunts still lingered, she shielded herself with knowledge, an armor forged in her grandmother's kitchen and tempered by late-night study sessions. And deep inside, she nurtured a growing conviction. If she could master the world of books, no classroom bully could ever diminish her light again. The halls of Lincoln High School echoed with locker doors slamming and teenage laughter as Aaliyah Brooks strode toward her first debate team meeting. Gone was the timid third grader who froze under Mrs. Hargrove's gaze. In her place stood a poised freshman whose chin lifted at the slightest provocation. Clad in a crisp school blazer and carrying a stack of index cards, Aaliyah felt the familiar thrill of argument, her chance to wield words as weapons against injustice. Her coach, Mr. Phillips, a lanky English teacher with a shock of white hair, greeted her with a knowing smile. "You ready to crush it today?" he asked. In class, she'd built a reputation as a careful listener and relentless questioner. Now she would learn to marshal her fury into persuasive power. That afternoon in the debate room, under fluorescent lights and banners proclaiming past state championships, Aaliyah watched older teammates spar on the topic of free speech rights in public schools. When her turn came, she stepped to the podium and unfolded her carefully rehearsed opening lines on juvenile justice reform. Her voice rang clear, each point buttressed by statistics she'd unearthed in the encyclopedias at home. She challenged her opponent's assumptions, pivoted smoothly to her rebuttal, and landed her final flourish on a note of moral urgency. Applause rippled through the room. Even the bullies who'd once whispered "nerd" in the back row sat up straighter, eyes widening at her deft command of rhetoric. Mr. Phillips clapped hardest of all, pride shining in his eyes. Beyond the debate team, Aaliyah excelled in every classroom. She led study groups in chemistry lab, tutoring classmates through balancing equations late into lunch periods. She spearheaded the school newspaper's editorial page, penning incisive columns on budget cuts that threatened arts programs and the need for culturally inclusive curricula. Each byline bolstered her confidence and stung the ears of teachers who remembered her as the awkward child they once dismissed. Outside academics, Aaliyah formed a secret book club for struggling readers, meeting after school in the art room's quiet corner. There, she guided fellow students through classic stories, encouraging them to discover their own voices. When a shy sophomore named Marcus began to read passages aloud without trembling, Aaliyah felt the same surge of triumph she remembered from her grandmother's kitchen. By senior year, Aaliyah's achievements glittered on her resume. Debate team captain, valedictorian contender, editor-in-chief, national merit finalist, and founder of the Lincoln Literacy Circle. At graduation, she delivered the valedictory address before the bleachers filled with beaming families and faculty. With poise and passion, she recounted her journey, from a third-grade girl ridiculed for mispronouncing daffodil to a young scholar determined to redefine her own narrative. As her classmates rose in a standing ovation, even the hardened face of Mrs. Hargrove, now an honored guest in the audience, softened with what looked unmistakably like pride. In that shining moment, Aaliyah Brooks proved that resilience, scholarship, and leadership could transform the wounds of childhood into the foundations of a bright, unbowed future. When Aaliyah Brooks stepped onto Columbia University's leafy campus as a freshman, she carried a mix of exhilaration and imposter's doubt in her satin-lined backpack. The Gothic stone buildings dwarfed her, and the brisk autumn wind whipped her notes as she hurried across South Lawn to her first seminar, Foundations of Educational Policy. Inside an oak-paneled classroom, Professor Wellington, a tenured scholar with a reputation for brilliance and rigidity, glanced at her undergraduate transcript and offered a polite nod before dismissing her proposal for independent research. "Your topic on racialized discipline in urban schools is interesting," he said, tapping her outline. "But frankly, it's anecdotal. Come back when you have quantitative data worthy of real inquiry." Aaliyah's heart sank as she gathered her papers. But instead of retreating, she signed up for every statistics workshop in the Student Center, devouring probability theory and regression analysis, until the formulas felt like second nature. Outside class, she balanced part-time work as a library assistant, shelving stacks of dusty journals and ebooks so she could access the latest studies on school-to-prison pipelines. Late nights found her in the lab's computer cluster, teaching herself R and Python to analyze disciplinary records she'd painstakingly obtained through public records requests. When her classmates socialized over coffee in the quad, Aaliyah sat hunched over her laptop, eyes red but mind alight with hypotheses and data visualizations. Her persistence paid off when she secured a coveted summer internship at the Institute for Urban Education Research, under the mentorship of Dr. Sanders, a professor who championed community-driven research. Aaliyah led a team in coding thousands of incident reports from 5 school districts. Together, they uncovered a startling pattern. Black girls received suspensions at twice the rate of white boys for identical infractions. Armed with this evidence, Aaliyah returned to Professor Wellington's office that September. She presented her preliminary findings, maps of suspension hotspots, statistical models showing racial bias, and testimonials from affected students. Wellington leaned back, eyes narrowing at the crisp charts on her tablet. After a tense silence, he offered a rare, approving smile. "Impressive work, Ms. Brooks. I'll be proud to list this in my next publication." By senior year, her groundbreaking paper on gendered racial disparities in school discipline appeared in the Journal of Educational Equity, earning citations from national policymakers. Commencement found her draped in Phi Beta Kappa regalia, valedictory honors still shimmering in her mind. But the real victory lay in having transformed Professor Wellington's skepticism into authentic scholarly respect. At Columbia's Grand Auditorium, Aaliyah Brooks walked across the stage, not as the timid child once ridiculed, but as a confident scholar whose data-driven voice could no longer be dismissed. The crisp autumn morning found Dr. Aaliyah Brooks crossing Harvard's historic yard en route to Emerson Hall, her new home for teaching inclusive pedagogy. Her tailored blazer and silk scarf concealed the tremor in her stomach. Today was her debut as a tenure-track professor. Inside her satchel, she carried a stack of case study packets, PowerPoint clicker in hand, and the fierce determination born of a lifetime of overcoming doubt. Outside room 312, students murmured in clusters. Education majors, veteran teachers returning for renewal credits, even a handful of seasoned adjuncts who peeked at administrative emails on their phones. Aaliyah offered warm smiles as she unlocked the door, then froze when she saw the nameplate on the lone adjunct's desk at the back. H.G. Mrs. Hargrove's initials. The teacher who had once ridiculed her in 3rd grade was now one of her colleagues, silently observing as tomorrow's educators filed in. Aaliyah's heart hammered, but she inhaled deeply and set her chin. As the room settled, she greeted her students with clear, confident tones. "Welcome to Inclusive Pedagogy. Our work this semester is to transform every classroom into a space where each child's potential is honored." She clicked to a slide showing a smiling, diverse classroom. Even Mrs. G, lean and silver-haired, looked up from her notes, eyebrows raised. Midway through the session, Aaliyah introduced her first module, Confronting Implicit Bias in Early Education. She passed around anonymized transcripts from her own 3rd grade classroom, mocked pronunciations, teacher annotations calling her slow, and classmates penned insults in the margins. The room fell silent as future teachers read the words. Aaliyah's voice wavered only once, then steadied. "These are the wounds left unhealed when educators fail to see beyond a student's mistakes. Our job is not punishment, but empowerment." A hand shot up, Mrs. G's. "Dr. Brooks, is it professional to use personal history as a teaching tool? I worry it blurs boundaries." The question hung heavy. Aaliyah held her gaze. Boundaries protect children, yes, but turning away from our own past mistakes blinds us to the harm we inflict. By owning my story, I offer you a mirror. Examine your reactions before you judge your students. The class resumed with charged energy. Small group role plays, where one student played a dismissive teacher and another a struggling learner. Mrs. G participated quietly, her voice soft but precise in offering feedback. After the bell, she lingered at the back. Aaliyah paused as Mrs. G approached, heart thudding. "Dr. Brooks," she began, voice low, I I saw a strength in your approach today that I didn't expect. My methods were once rigid. I hope I can learn from yours." Aaliyah felt relief and cautious hope swell. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "I believe every educator can grow. I look forward to our work together." Later that week, Aaliyah faced her first faculty meeting. The department chair praised her innovative syllabus, but warned traditionalists might resist. When HG spoke up, ironically defending Aaliyah's module as a necessary reckoning, the room fell silent. It was a small but seismic shift. The teacher who once sought to diminish her now defended her vision. Walking back through Harvard's autumn leaves, Aaliyah Brooks allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had returned to the halls of judgment, not as a timid child, but as the scholar forging change, transforming her past wounds into lessons that would shape a new generation of educators. By mid-semester, Emerson Hall's seminar room had become Aaliyah Brooks's laboratory of transformation. On this crisp Tuesday morning, 24 graduate students, future principals, curriculum specialists, and veteran teachers sat behind narrow desks, their notebooks poised. At the front, Aaliyah surveyed their faces, eager, skeptical, some visibly weary of pedagogical fads. "Today," she began, voice steady, "we confront the moment a teacher's bias can shatter a child's confidence." She clicked to a slide showing two vignettes. One, Mrs. Hargrove's derision of third-grade Aaliyah's mispronunciation. The other, Aaliyah's grandmother quizzing her with encyclopedias at home. Murmurs rippled as students recognized the stakes. Aaliyah divided the class into groups for a role play. One student played the third-grade teacher, reading a reluctant child's essay aloud. Another, the student, head bowed. As simulated laughter filled the room, Aaliyah paused them. "What did you feel in your role?" she asked. Hands shot up. Frustration, shame, anger. Next, she invited them to pivot, this time as teacher allies, intervening. One student knelt beside the child, whispered encouragement. Another redirected the class to discuss the essay's strength rather than its flaws. Gasps of realization passed around the room. Small acts of support could avert lasting harm. Midway, a ripple of tension surfaced when HG, Mrs. Hargrove's initials still on her adjunct nameplate, challenged the exercise. "In real classrooms, time is tight. Can teachers afford these interventions?" Her tone was measured, but I knew the question masked old defenses. Aaliyah met her gaze calmly. "Empathy need not replace rigor," she replied. "It accelerates learning by keeping students engaged rather than sidelined." To underscore her point, Aaliyah presented data from her own research. Schools implementing bias interruptions saw a 40% drop in office referrals and a 25% rise in student participation. As charts scrolled across the screen, murmurs turned to nods. Even adjuncts furrowed brows in thoughtful concession. For the final exercise, Aaliyah invited each future teacher to draft a response rubric for feedback, criteria that balanced corrective guidance with affirmations of student effort. Groups animatedly debated language, needs improvement versus next steps, good attempt versus keep refining. At the end, they shared rubrics that brimmed with constructive warmth. As the bell rang, Mrs. G lingered at the back, holding her rubric. She approached Aaliyah afterward. "Your framework, it reframes discipline as dialogue." Her voice cracked with rare vulnerability. Aaliyah smiled. "Thank you. That's exactly the lesson I hoped we'd learn." Walking out into the autumn light, Aaliyah felt the charge of real change. In that lecture hall, once haunted by her own third-grade trauma, she had turned personal scars into teaching tools, equipping a new generation of educators with strategies to heal, not harm, every child in their care. The afternoon sun slanted through the arched windows of Harvard's Sanders Theater as Dr. Aaliyah Brooks took the stage to accept the Innovator in Teaching Award. The vaulted ceiling echoed with the soft rustle of programs and the hum of anticipation. Seated in the front row sat her colleagues, Professors Caldwell and Reyes, while beyond them filled every balcony and aisle of graduate students, deans, and even Mrs. H.G., now using her full name, Helen Garrison, tucked respectfully into the back. Aaliyah's heart swelled as the orchestra of applause rose, not for the bullied child of Lincoln Elementary, but for the scholar who had transformed her wounds into wisdom for others. Clutching the Crystal Award, Aaliyah's voice rang clear as she began her acceptance speech. When I stood before you today, I carried not only my own story, but the stories of every child silenced by a careless word, every teacher trapped in old habits, and every future educator poised to make a difference. This award belongs to the countless students who taught me resilience, to my grandmother, whose midnight quizzes fueled my curiosity, and to every one of you here, my colleagues, my students, and yes, even Helen Garrison, whose early criticism drove me to prove that compassion yields lasting learning. She paused as the audience rose, and tears glimmered in Helen's eyes. Later, in the candlelit reception hall, Dr. Brooks moved gracefully through clusters of young scholars, sharing how her methods had reshaped their classrooms, from restructuring harsh discipline policies to embedding bias interruptions in daily lesson plans. At one table, Helen Garrison approached, her voice hushed but steady. Aaliyah, your work has transformed my own teaching. Thank you for showing me how to listen. They embraced, two women united by a journey from pain to partnership. As evening settled, Aaliyah stepped onto the breezy balcony overlooking Harvard Yard, metal glinting at her collar. Surrounding her were graduates who had once been the shy children she'd mentored. Now they carried toolkits of empathy and innovation into school districts across the country. Together they watched the lanterns strung between ancient oaks, each light a symbol of hope ignited. In that moment, Dr. Aaliyah Brooks understood that her greatest lesson was not merely in curriculum design, but in forging a circle of empowerment, where every teacher, student, and survivor becomes both learner and leader in the ongoing story of education.